What's up, guys? Welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we hear Job's response in chapter number 6. Let's get started.
All right, Job chapter number 6. Remember, what's happening in Job is there's this back and forth conversation where Job talks and one of his friends talk. It's also a weird spot because throughout most of the book, we call these guys Job's friends, but they're really not. They're really not friendly. As a matter of fact, we have to wonder, of all the things that, and all the ways that Job was attacked throughout chapter 1 and 2, all the things he lost, what if these friends were the last of the attacks? I mean, they're the ones that stick with him the longest and give him the most trouble. This is, if we're looking for a class on how not to be helpful, how not to counsel somebody, and how not to be a good friend, listen, these guys have it. So we need to be very careful with this. Matter of fact, this is a good time to kind of stop and say, when we're struggling, more important than it is for us to know the source of our suffering, we need to be really careful about the response to our suffering. Now, just kind of as a general bit of background, is chapter 6 is where we're going to be on Sunday. So read this and reread it, get ready for Sunday, and just understand, as Job doesn't get a whole lot of answers to his question, this book is not built to answer all of our questions. It may pose a lot, and it may get us to ask a lot, but it's not going to give a lot of answers. Why? Because in life, we're not going to always have the answer. But we can always have a walk with God. And more important than we need the answers, we need God. Now, the other thing I think that's going to be helpful here is that, nobody in this book is going to be completely wrong, nor are they going to be completely right. So Job's friends, Mom and John talked about this yesterday. Job's friends had a lot of right things to say about God. Where they got it wrong was they made some wrong conclusions about Job. See, they assumed that God always blesses the good and he always punishes the bad. And because Job was going through a hard time, they believed that he was being punished for something he had done. Now, we know that's not the case because we read chapter 1, but they don't know that. They're drawing wrong conclusions, but they have some right stuff. Well, Job, he's done nothing to bring all of this punishment on, but he also, you're going to see him in the book kind of overstep the bounds of what he presumes as to God's motives behind what he's allowed to happen to him. So nobody's completely right, but nobody's completely wrong. We got a little bit of truth mixed with a little bit of error, and it really just kind of feeds on itself. I'm going to tell you this. We need to be good at, and here's something I learned a long time ago and I always thought was helpful. We need to be good at chewing up the meat but spitting out the bones. So like if you're going to eat a chicken wing, you put the thing in your mouth and you want to take the meat, but you kick out the bones. Understand this. I also heard this a long time ago. Even a broken clock is right how many times a day? Twice a day. So it's not completely wrong. It's got at least twice a day where it's right. Well, what if most of us and most of life isn't about finding answers? It's about knowing how to take the good and spit out the bad, and to be humble enough to listen and wise enough to kind of process through some things. Jax, what did you notice in this chapter?
So my takeaway comes from verses 14 through 18, and this is where Job compares his friends to things that fade away. And it says, he who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. My brothers are treacherous as a torrent bed, as torrential streams that pass away, which are dark with ice, and where the snow hides itself. When they melt, they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. The caravans turn aside from their course, and they go up into the waste and perish. Okay, so in these verses, Job is comparing his friends, because they're not really his friends, really. And so he compares them to things that are there when you don't need them, but they disappear when you do need them. Like on a hot day, you want something to drink. And so he compares them to this creek that's always there until it gets so hot that the creek dries up and it evaporates. So Job's friends are like that. They're there through the good parts of his life, but now that he really needs them to comfort him and be with him, they're not there, and instead they're making him more thirsty.
Yeah, I mean, It's a tough situation to get into when you really need help and you can't find it, or when you need help and the help you thought you had is more, they're adding to the problem. Job is going to say in verse number 2, he says, "Oh, that my grief were fully weighed and my calamity laid on scales." And what he's talking about, he said, man, this stuff is too heavy for me to carry. And maybe we all go through a season of life where we feel like life's problems, life's troubles, life's tribulations, maybe they are too much for us to carry. And maybe that's why, maybe the reason the Lord allows that is because if we were able to carry everything, we wouldn't have to trust in Him. You know, there's a myth going on around the world that there's a verse in the Bible that says that God will never give us more than we can handle. You ever heard that?
Is that in Hezekiah?
Yeah, the book of Hezekiah. That's right. So now there is a verse of the Bible that says that God will never allow us to be tempted beyond what we can handle, but He'll give us a way of escape. A lot of people misquote that and say, "Oh, well, God will never give me more than I can handle." And you'll see them go through tough times. They'll go, "I know the Bible says God will never give me more than I can handle." Well, listen. That's literally not in the Bible, and God will give us more than we can handle, because if we could handle anything, we would never have to trust in Him. On days where we cannot handle it, we can hold on to other passages of the Bible that pick up the other slack and give us the other side of the story. Like Hebrews chapter number 4, verse 15 and 16 says this, "For we do not have a high priest," it's talking about Jesus, "we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. So let us boldly, therefore, come to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." Well, my goodness, if we never had a need we couldn't meet, we would never have to run to Him. What if life is about showing us just how much we need God? By the way, when you read through this story, one of the saddest things for me is to read like verse 25, where Job is truly willing to listen. Like in verse 24, he says, "Teach me and I'll hold my tongue. Cause me to understand wherein I've erred." He said, "I'm willing to listen if you got some truth." But verse 25, he says, "But how forceful are your right words?" And then he says, "But what does your arguing prove?" Listen, we got to be careful that as we try to help or comfort or encourage, even if we got a little bit of truth to work with, we got to make sure that our heart doesn't go cold. We can be right about a little bit, but wrong in how we do it. So we need to be very careful. Look, I don't know about you, but if I know that one day I'm going to have to sit with somebody on their worst day, I really do want to I want to sit with them, and I want to do it well. I sure don't want to add to the problem. So as we read this, let's learn from what they did wrong, and let's get it right and be good for Jesus and good for our neighbor. All right?